Hi everyone, it's Desiree. So now we've seen technique number 2 where we focused on ink smushing. So as always, after I do the technique video, I'm always going to follow up with a video showing how to incorporate that technique into a card, or in this case, 2 cards. Yep, got carried away. So the products that we're also going to be using are from Hero Arts. They were actually the add-ons from the February kit because I love feathers. So I had to have all the feathers. So let's get started doing our ink smushing. So I've done a lot of editing, so if you want to see the details, please look at the video that shows the technique. So by now, after watching that, you should have a basic understanding. We take our medium, put it down onto a craft mat, we add water so that we can pick it up onto our cardstock or Bristol paper or water paper. Now the paper I am using this time is watercolor paper. It's not Bristol like I did in the technique. Remember, after every layer, we want to make sure that we dry it. So I'm using 3 colors. I went from a light to a medium to a dark. With the dark, I only put a little bit down. After I put the water, I wiggled my finger through it, just to try to move that around to get an even flow across the page, which is what I was looking for. So again, as long as, what the key thing is when it comes to ink smushing, if you're going to do layers, is dry between each of your layers. And don't throw your stamp pad across the table because it makes a mess. So we finished the first panel. So now here's the second panel. I'm only using the dark color of those 3 shades that I chose, which was Blushing Bride, Tangerine Tango, and Rose Red. So there's our orange side on the right, and then we have our rose red side on the left. So the orange background is going to be the card base, and of course I used my Penny Black Antique Frames dies, and now I'm going to pull in the fancy die from Hero Arts, and I've cut 3 feathers from the other smushed background that I created. Now, what's great with these fancy dies, there's certain areas that you can prop up to give it texture and dimension. So I'm going to glue the one down, and I'm only going to put glue along the center because, again, it's kind of broken in the center so it can bend and just create a different shape. I took the other, a second one, and I slid it within the other feather, and now we're just going to set that up, continuing towards the upper left-hand corner. So you can still see these feathers. I know you're amazed I did not pull out my vintage photo and ink around the edges, which you could certainly have done, or you could have used any color, you know, black, a red. I am into the vintage photo, but this is what I wanted this to show. If you just ink smush, just doing that technique, you will get the definition of your card. I pulled a sentiment from a Tim Holtz stamp set, and it just says, "Just believe." To give some more contrast, I actually am using a light blue card base. That's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 top folding. And that's the first card using this technique. But let's go one step further. Can we emboss and still perform an ink smushing technique? I believe we could. I believe I've seen it in other videos, but you know what? My mind was escaping me. But I wanted to use all of these stamps. There is such great detail with these stamps from Hero Arts, and I placed them on one of my larger Fiskars stamp positioning acrylic blocks. So once I have them in position, I'm using my Versamark ink, and I've pulled in again another piece of Canson XL watercolor paper. And I'm just going to stamp these right down. And then once I know that I believe I have a good impression, I'm hoping, keeping fingers crossed here, I'm going to use my Gold Recollections embossing powder. But you can just see the detail of these stamps and those fine lines. I'm going to heat set that to make sure all of the powder is melted on this piece of watercolor paper. Then I'm going to do my ink smushing. I didn't want to do my ink smushing first. You can take a panel, do all of your ink smushing, then do your embossing. I tend to work backwards. So I wanted to see what exactly this would do. So same technique is coming in. This time I'm using Soft Sky, Marina Mist, and Night of Navy from Stampin' Up. I really do like the Stampin' Up inks for ink smushing. I think they go beautifully. They work really well with water, and they're excellent to watercolor with as well. So I wanted to put a very light color down, and that's definitely Soft Sky. You can see it's very faint. Now, when you heat set this, when you want this paper to dry, you don't want to stay in one place too long. You want to keep your heat gun up far because you don't want to continue to melt the embossed areas if you want that luster to stay. I'm coming in with the next colors, Marina Mist and a little bit of the Night of Navy to put in certain areas. Because if you overheat embossing powder, it will actually turn a color and actually, kind of burn away. That's kind of what I was looking for with this, but it didn't happen. But I was okay if it did. So this did work. Again, just make sure you keep your heat gun up high so that you're not reactivating your embossing powder to continue it to melt. Again, you could reverse this. There was just a different look that I wanted to see if it would happen. There was the vintage photo ink that came around, and again, I used my antique frames from Penny Black. I'm using a double-sided foam tape. Now, this is a good foam tape, but to use it, you do have to use a pointy tool to pick up to lift off the backing. So I'm not really going to advertise and promote that, but it was just something that I had in my stash. So you can see I did not lose the luster of my embossing powder. When it came to that, it is another way that you can do your ink smushing techniques. And these are pretty much the two cards showing what you can do and what you can achieve with ink smushing. So I do hope you enjoyed this. Please hit the thumbs up if you did. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Any comments or questions, I encourage you to leave them down below. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Most of the products that I used, some of them, not everything, will be listed down below in case you're curious, especially the stamp set and the dies that I did use. So I hope you learned something from the technique video and exactly what you can do with it and the beautiful effects that can be achieved. I hope you had a great weekend, and always remember, everyone, be creative.